we have a lot of people choosing a KiwiSaver just based on past year returns, saying, hey, this KiwiSaver fund has done amazingly well in the last year. All my friends are talking about it. I should go there. Performance chasing essentially isn't a really good idea, because what's done really well in the last year most probably will revert to the mean and underperform next year. So it's about putting a lot more research into selection of your KiwiSaver provider, and that's what companies like National Capital do.
So we're here with Clive from National Capital. I gotta act like I haven't met you before. Yeah. How you going, mate?
All good.
Just on. Tell us about your COVID journey.
COVID. Well, I guess
was it easy or?
I guess I was one of the lucky ones, I suppose.
Yeah.
The ability to kind of do most of what I do in front of a computer from home allowed me to kind of, I guess, made my COVID journey much easier than a lot of the other people out there for whom it was for whom it was way more difficult, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my element. I had my the computer in the kitchen to hold myself accountable. No one cared, but I was just like there. And anytime I felt like the seat was empty, I just felt like a loser. Like I was like, I'd letting the team down, and no one cared. No one ever actually oh, Brian, why aren't you working? I was like, well, I think anytime we're kicking into this, I think like the back end story, and you've had quite an interesting story. You've already reached your own level of success and started your own business again, a new one.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go back to young Clive. Where are you born? Were you born from?
Well, I was born in Mumbai, India.
Good man.
And this was a long time back.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I was always very interested in computers. So I was a pretty nerdy kid.
Were there computers you could play with in Mumbai when you were younger?
Yeah. So I guess my first computer.
Because he's old, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. My first computer was one that my mum brought home from work. So it was her office laptop. It was like this thick.
Yeah.
And then it had like DOS on it and all.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I started playing on that and I was addicted for life.
What'd you do on it? Like, what is it like? What was on those computers then? Was it?
Most probably they would have just been a word processing software. One of the really old ones. So I might have just been typing stuff on it. But yeah, after that I got into a little bit of programming using one of the early programming languages called BASIC. So I used that and I made my own cockroach game.
Cockroach game?
Yeah, where you basically it's sort of like a horse racing game, but there were cockroaches racing, so you could bet on the cockroach you thought would win. And if you won, then it would kind of, give you some money.
How does one come to what was the design process? You know, sitting at home, you learn a bit of basic code, and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to, what were the different ideas before you went, okay, cockroaches?
Well, I suppose, interestingly enough, I have a big phobia of cockroaches. Yeah. So potentially that was part of my way of processing that phobia, make it into a game.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Okay.
I guess that explains the cockroaches. And the fact that I kind of created a software in a game was just, I guess, reflective of the age and just playing around. And the first thing, I guess, when you're young and you want to create would be a game.
Was it ever an escape as well? You know, like maybe people at school were mean, so at least with your cockroach game and like your coding, like you could control the outcome. Like, was it all like... Or were you just perfectly accepted and everything was a streamlined process in your life? Or
no, I guess it could have been. So another thing about me is that when I was young and even now, I stammer a bit. So I guess talking to a computer was much easier for me than talking to people. And I guess that kind of fueled my early attraction to computers too.
Was there a moment like you're standing up in school? I didn't tell we were going to talk like this, but you're standing up in school and you had to do a speech and you couldn't get it out and you're stuttering and you're freaking out and then like people laughed, or was there any like...
No. Luckily for me, I didn't really have any moments like that.
Huh. Do you know what it causes it, or just it is what it is?
It's what it is, I guess.
Huh, yeah. Well then it's distinctly Clive now. It's your brand.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. So you're in Mumbai in India.
Yeah.
And you found this computer and you made cockroach games, and then what?
Definitely.
You stayed there,
and then
and
then in a few years I was getting a computer engineering degree in Mumbai, and then I was this was just around the time when it wasn't just pre-2000. So I started an internet consultancy there and kind of doing a little bit of internet marketing and helping companies with that. And that took off. And that was basically my first business that was really successful.
How old were you when you were?
I launched it when I was 18 and continued working on it for a few years.
Did your parents think you were a failure? Were they like, what are you doing with your life? You should be studying? Did you get
Actually, my first domain name, I borrowed money from my mum to buy it. So they were definitely supportive of the entire process.
What was the domain name?
I think
how much was it?
I think back in the day, you had to pay $39 a year for a domain name, and you had to send a check off to a company in the States. It was a very, very long process.
Wow. Oh, so you send your $39 check, and then by the time it gets there, then you don't have the rights to the domain because someone else's check got there first.
Potentially, yeah.
Wow. So what was it like? Because I see sort of technology now around blockchain and Bitcoin and, NFTs sort of akin to that internet moment where everyone's getting all G'd up about this technology, thinking they're going to make a whole lot of money. What was it actually like, that culture and like that? Did you see that sort of investment mindset where everyone was just so excited about the internet and they didn't believe it? And
definitely. We're talking pre-2000 year. I'm very close to that. We're talking .com bubble. So there were definitely people very excited about the potential of the internet. And back then it was more about the internet just replacing what we would do in real life. So I guess a lot of the companies back then were very similar to the companies now. They just weren't successful because they didn't have the technology, etc., that we had now.
And what was it actually like to actually internet market back then? What would you even do? So you got the site. There's not many people on the internet. You got to convince these business owners, hey, this isn't just some magic box like the TV was when it first came out. Like it could actually help your business. What was that like?
It was kind of like, I suppose internet marketing back then was quite similar to what we've got now, other than social media. So there was a lot of search engine optimization, search engine marketing. Only back then, there were a lot of search engines, not just Google. So it was kind of like, it was focused there. We're talking to people again. It was difficult back then, trying to convince people that, you should be marketing on the internet, because a lot of people did not even have websites. So I guess internet marketing back then also had an element of website design and actually helping people to get onto the internet for the first time.
And I guess in those moments as well, like any new technology, any new innovation has the greatest opportunity for anyone willing to do it, but the greatest resistance.
Exactly.
Because it's such a foreign concept. Yeah, I mean, it's out the gate. So you're 18, you get your parents to send the check off to USA, and then you're like, okay, I'm off. I'm doing this business. And so what was that like? Did you have staff? Was it just you?
Band? It was just me to start off with. And then I guess as I got busier, it organically grew from there. And I started hiring staff to help me with this and that. And that ultimately grew into a very successful company then.
Yeah? And then you just sold it, or like?
So I'm still a shareholder of that company. But then that brings us to about 14 years back, when I decided that, my time in India was done. And I wanted to explore the rest of the world. And that's when New Zealand comes in. So I guess a lot of people ask me, how did I decide New Zealand? And so I suppose you would have asked me the same thing.
Yeah,
so I'll just preempt that question. But my answer, I pretty much picked New Zealand off a map. The only thing I knew about New Zealand before I came here was its cricket team, and someone telling me there were more sheep in New Zealand than people.
Yeah, I'm coming. See, you fit in. That's, we have a great affinity with sheep. Is that why? You just had better dating options? No, I won't get you in trouble. So, you came here 14 years ago, and then what? You got a job, just chilled because you're balling, because you're successful company?
So I came here and I kind of did a year of education to basically, again, just get myself, I guess, really into New Zealand culture. That's the best way to do it when you're new to a country. So I did that, and then I got a job, got my residency here, got my citizenship, and I restarted my business here. But then a few years into it, kind of like I was the only New Zealand employee of that business, and I wanted to kind of look at other things that I wanted to do. And it took me back to when I first came to New Zealand. I actually reached out to get financial advice. But what I found out at that stage was a lot of people out there offering financial advice, at least the ones I reached, ultimately were just people trying to sell me property. Now, in hindsight, maybe I should have just bought a bunch of property back then, and it would have all been fine. But it wasn't real financial advice. And since then, I figured out that there seem to be two main types of financial advisors. One, really good financial advisors, but unfortunately, they can only help people who've already got a substantial sum of money that they need advice on. Mm-hmm. And then there's the financial advisors for the rest of us who unfortunately don't give that good financial advice. So that got me thinking. And I wanted to kind of like, I wanted to use my skills in technology and my passion for finance and investing that I already had, and bring them together to kind of create something that, a sort of service that could provide financial advice for the rest of us. And so National Capital was born from there. So National Capital hopefully is the kind of financial advice service that can provide really good, high quality financial advice, the kind that you provide, Ryan, to the rest of us.
He doesn't know. I just told him I'd give good financial advice, but thank you. Well, so when you start building, you're like, okay, there's this unmet need, which I agree. Most advisors, they have to have help with a lump sum because we live off the ongoing fee. Yep. So if you got $1,000 invested, 1% of that doesn't go far. So it's a fine line, and people need that help and support. And then you got the free budgeting agencies where they're subsidized by the government and they do their best, and there's some value to it, but it's hard to get the level of advice that you want. So what was it like when you're like, okay, here's an issue, now I'm going to build it? We're like, oh my God, like how am I going to do this? Like what's the compliance? Like I like the nitty gritty stuff, like no, it's like Sunshine National Capital, change the world. You know what I mean? What was it like? You're like, okay, I'm going to get a crack.
Yeah, it was kind of like, luckily for me, it was the same time as the government was just putting out the digital advice exemption. So the digital advice exemption, what we refer to, I guess, as a robo-advice license, allowed us to give financial advice using computers, whereas prior to that, the legal position was financial advice can only be given by a real person. So this changed things completely, which allowed us to actually automate parts, if not all aspects of financial advice. Now, but coming back to your question, initially it was just about me kind of saying that, hey, I know how to program, so why don't I jump in, I'll build a website, I'll do everything. So I kind of started doing everything myself. I reached out. The only place I suppose right at the start I went out and I got external advice was in compliance, because I think that's one of the big stumbling blocks for anyone who wants to get into this industry. It's a very compliance heavy,
which is sad, really important
industry. I guess for me, I think it is very important. So it took me about 7 months to get the digital advice exemption. So that's a very long time to get a license. But what that allowed me to do, and kind of in talking with the FMA, it allowed me to build my business in a very good way. So almost like fulfilling all the requirements of the regulation actually ended up in me building a very, very good business. So I actually see compliance not as a problem to solve, but actually an opportunity for you to tick all the right boxes. So you've got organizations like the FMA who are pretty much acting as free consultants for you, helping you build your business.
Geez, it's starting to feel like you're an affiliate for FMA. Every time I call them, they're like, I can't help you because, there's illegal repercussions for us if I give you advice. So if you're getting this free consultation, you got to tell me how to do it. I love that they're there. That it's useful that they're helping. But I do agree, like, if you get a baseline framework on how to build your business, and there's guidelines, and they've used, the historic sort of interactions financial advice has had with clients. There's value to it. I'm not, running away from it. It's just that just wasn't my experience, but that's okay. I'm happy for you. Well, so what's that actually like? The compliant, like, what does a digital advice platform actually have to think about or do, and how's it different? And
I think at its core, there are two very important things to think about. And one of them, of course, is the actual security of user data. Because now we're talking about everything being saved on some sort of cloud service. So it's making sure that, we've really thought about how we're going to keep our users' data safe. We can't just kind of put it on a paper and lock it in a safe in an office anymore. Where we've got to think about other things. So it's kind of proving to the regulator that we've thought about all of that, and we've actually put into place whatever is required to keep our users' data safe. And the second thing is ensuring that how can we make sure that the system that we've put in place, which is right now a combination of technology and live advisors, how can we make sure that system is giving good advice? Because prior to digital advice, the onus to give good advice was on the advisor. So if you gave bad advice, that was on you. But now it's with the new regime in place, it's slightly different. The onus is not exclusively on the advisor, but on the entire entity. And that entity includes the live advisor, the company, the technology, everything. So how do we make sure who's ultimately responsible? So the person ultimately responsible for all of that is me. So I've got to make sure that the technology and all the associated elements with it behave in a way that ultimately give our clients good advice, the same kind of advice that they would expect from someone. Again, just using you as an example, like you, mate.
You're just endorsing everything on this podcast. So thank you. So what would be the important key components of good digital advice?
I guess it would be very similar to components of good advice from a normal advisor. Live advisor, making sure that you've really understood the client's needs, making sure that the advice is fit for purpose for that client. What we give is personalized advice. So our advice is not just, hey, if you're young, go into a growth KiwiSaver fund. If you're old, go into a conservative KiwiSaver fund. No, it's personalized to you. It's personalized to your goal, your particular financial situation at that time, your capacity and your tolerance for market volatility, which is the ups and downs of the market. So it's making sure that the advice is fit for purpose for you as an individual, and also ensuring that you actually understand the advice. So when you as a client take a final decision, you're taking that as an educated consumer, not just because I told you so. And running from all of that, I think kind of lost my chain of thought here.
That's right. I'm just gonna put pressure on you, secret.
there was in another I suppose one additional aspect of digital advice is also ensuring that the person we're giving digital advice to, is digital advice appropriate for that person or not. So we need to also ensure that, hey, if we believe, Ryan, you're not the right person to get digital advice, you should actually be speaking to a live financial advisor. We need systems and processes in place to kind of like make sure that we recognize that and let you know that.
How do you differentiate that? Do you do like a competency quiz? If they get 80 out of 100, you're like,
No,
nah,
it's what we're doing right now is more of, it depends on the complexity of a client.
Oh, okay. That makes
So
sense.
once again, if you're a 26-year-old, or let me say, if you're a 31-year-old who's just bought his first home and now is just saving for retirement, which is another 30 years, and your focus is just, I just need to save as much as I can, that's quite a simple situation. If you're someone who has different sources of income, including, say, government grants, etc., and you're already retired and you really need to be kind of thinking about how you invest your money so that potentially any benefits that you receive from the government are not affected, etc., that's potentially something that our algorithm and our advice can't handle right now. So that's when, rather than us just kind of like being a one size fits all, that's when we step away and we say like, hey, you know what, we cannot help you, but here are some resources, here's someone else who could potentially help you.
So you're like cyborg essentially. You know when where the software that they created around chess, it would beat a lot of human players.
Yeah.
But then the guy combined it.
Exactly.
The internet and the human.
Exactly. So that's exactly what National Capital is right now. We call ourselves a hybrid advisor. So we're trying to use like the best of both worlds. We're trying to use technology and real people in order to give the best advice that we can. As an example, so when I first got into the financial advice industry, I started off as a paraplanner.
Did you pull bugger?
Yeah. So a paraplanner, for those who don't know what they do, is someone who kind of actually creates the entire plan for the it's basically the back end work. So once a financial advisor has had a chat with a client, the financial advisor will make some notes, make some advice, and then the paraplanner needs to put it all into a format that would be understandable by the client, do some more research, etc., etc. So back then, my job took me an average of about 4 hours to basically formulate that advice and put it into documentation that was both compliant and understandable by the client. At National Capital, we've got that down to 0.8 seconds.
Yeah, I need some of that.
But the reason why I'm kind of like bragging about that is to just amplify the fact that that is the reason now that National Capital can go out there and help clients with $10,000 in their KiwiSaver account, as opposed to why a normal financial advisor would not be able to help them. It's not that all financial advisors out there don't want to help people. It's just they don't have the technology and the resources to be able to help people that we can help.
Yeah, I mean, that's always my thing, is like, I'm driven by solving the problem, and you need to reach a certain, if you reach scale, then you need efficiencies, and the current process is very inefficient. They do the handwritten notes, you type it up, you spend maybe 3-4 hours doing what it takes to pull it out, and then you go see them again, and you go through it, and then maybe actually you didn't collect the information perfectly correctly, and you might have to do it again. And
Exactly.
So I think I remember you were saying that you had some ideas around KiwiSaver that might be quite useful, because that's your number one offering at the moment. National Capital helps people that can't necessarily get access to advisors, have the cyborg hybrid approach. I'm going to call it cyborg. What would be your top tips around KiwiSaver as I just changed the camera over? Just roll, keep talking.
Yeah. Well, I think most importantly, it's a lot of people are approaching KiwiSaver from either like, oh my god, this is too complicated for me, so I'm not going to do anything about it, or KiwiSaver is really simple, so I'll just
Or
DIY
it's a scam.
it.
That's a common. The third one is a scam. I get a lot of that on social media. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's a scam. Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, carry on.
But so I think for us, the main thing what we're trying to do out there is show that KiwiSaver is nothing but another investment. So it's neither very complicated, nor it is something that you potentially would DIY, because ultimately we're talking about your retirement savings here.
Yeah.
KiwiSaver is one of the it's soon getting to be one of Kiwi's largest savings and investments outside our homes. So it's something that we really need to give importance to. Now, KiwiSaver also, a lot of people kind of see it as a very I suppose people see KiwiSaver and their KiwiSaver choices as very rigid, that I should either be in a growth fund or I should be in a conservative fund. But for example, for our clients who are like close to retirement but still need growth, you can do things in KiwiSaver. Like you can actually create an investment strategy inside KiwiSaver that gives you growth but also protects a portion of your money from short-term volatility, so that you can actually go ahead and access that money when you are 65, or if you need to buy a first home, etc. So it's kind of putting strategies like that in place that allow people to get a lot more from their KiwiSaver account by even you don't really have to even change your provider. It's kind of just putting a better KiwiSaver strategy in place that'll give you better returns. And then again, we have a lot of people choosing a KiwiSaver provider, be their bank or someone else, just based on potentially past year returns, saying, hey, this KiwiSaver fund has done amazingly well in the last year. All my friends are talking about it. I should go there. Performance chasing essentially isn't a really good idea, because what's done really well in the last year most probably will revert to the mean and underperform next year. So it's about putting a lot more research into selection of your KiwiSaver provider, and that's what companies like National Capital do.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I mean, it's really like, as you say, today's winner's tomorrow's loser. Like, it's the median. It's interesting. So essentially what you're describing there with the KiwiSaver, you can do it bespoke, you can do it customized asset allocation. So you're effectively saying there's probably a certain portion to cash and bonds, probably more likely bonds, that are going to be used as income. And it's getting to the point where I was talking to a lady recently, and you can just hit up your KiwiSaver provider. It used to be really hard when you turn 65 to get the money out, tick all these boxes, really frustrating. But now you just tick a box fortnightly.
Exactly. So we're seeing more and more people using KiwiSaver as a retirement savings. And what I mean by that is not just a savings for retirement, but a way to manage their cash flow and investments after 65 too. So KiwiSaver does not end at 65. In fact, investing, I think this is something that a lot of clients that we speak to really say they found valuable, is the thought that your investing journey doesn't end at 65, because there's a lot of there is a lot of generic advice out there that says as the closer you get to 65, the more conservative you need to be. That could pretty much be wrong.
Yeah,
because you don't withdraw all your investments at 65 and then put them under your bed and start spending them. No, you've got another 20, 25, 30 years left in retirement where your money still needs to work for you. And 25 years is a very long investment horizon. And that takes me back to my initial point about KiwiSaver being an investment as it is. It's not something that you DIY. It's something that you actually should be putting some thought into and potentially getting some expert advice on.
I think it's the most important investment you ever make. Really, you get the 3% contribution, which, it's you put in the if you could walk down the street, I was saying in the other podcast, you walk down the street and you say, hey, if I give you $1,000, can you give me $1,000? Can you give me $2,000? And they're like, oh yeah, cool. Can you imagine how successful you would become if just like every week you just did that? And effectively 3% of the income you put in is being matched by your employer. And then also the government's putting in $521 for the first $1,000 that you put in, give or take, extra $43.
Yeah.
$1,042.86 if you want to be specific.
Oh, there you go.
Rough. And yeah, it's a single-handedly the most important investment, and most people either don't even look at it, are in a default fund provider, and when they get it at 65, spend it like lotto. Just cash it out. That's what I see. Not Not with our clients, fortunately, but anecdotally, it's scary. So how does someone go about becoming more mindful of their KiwiSaver? So you talked about research. They could go to National Capital, but what do they even look for in a KiwiSaver provider? Like, how do you differentiate, if not performance,
I suppose, and that's where the complexity comes. Now, I could say, hey, go to your KiwiSaver providers' websites, research them, read the PDS, read
product disclosure statement.
Read the statement of investment purpose. That's a very long document that explains to you exactly how your KiwiSaver provider makes decisions on where and how to invest your money. But I would say for most people, those documents are
gibberish.
Yeah. Well, they're not, but it's like I could be like
it's gibberish
if
to me.
if I'm buying a house, I could go down to the council and I could download all the reports, etc., and a building report, etc., and I could read that and I would get some knowledge out of it. But I would take all those documents and I would A, give it to my lawyer, and B, I would give them to my builder, because I know they can make a lot more sense out of it and they can pick things from there that I would have missed. So it's the same thing, I guess, with KiwiSaver research also. It's kind of making sure that the research is being done by people who have both the expertise and the time to actually go through and really read and understand those documents from all of the different KiwiSaver providers. So I think, again, and this goes against the normal grain of what we're being told right now, is that, hey, go out there, do your own KiwiSaver research, etc. I don't think most of us actually have the time and the capacity to do our own KiwiSaver research to the level at which I believe it should be done. Like, it's very easy to go out there and see what the past returns were, what the fees are, how ESG my KiwiSaver provider is. But most people get all of that from the marketing material provided by the KiwiSaver providers themselves. So I believe that's just not enough.
Well, on that, like, and just anyone listening, ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is basically, I think it's not there. I think it makes people feel good without necessarily making a meaningful change. But, it's the concept of, having less impact on the environment, being more mindful socially, and having, good governance, ticking the diversity box.
Yeah.
But where would they go? Okay, so I don't want to go to the council to download all these reports and read it. Like, who would you say provide good information that, you could develop your understanding? I know you've got an ebook. I know you pump out a whole lot of blogs and stuff, but this is always good to talk about things that people don't expect you to hype up some other people. Yeah. So where would you learn instead of having to do all the research and reading, the individual?
So I guess a good start is the government's website on sorted.co.nz.
Oh, yeah.
They do give you some basic information about KiwiSaver and what KiwiSaver as a scheme is. They also will give you access to all the documentation that you need to read on every KiwiSaver provider. They've got enough information on past returns, on fees, basically past returns and fees and asset allocation.
And service is the other criteria. Yeah.
But so the way Sorted measures service is just through a checklist. Is they've got a set of sort of services that they believe providers should have. So providers then go and say, like, yep, I've got this, I don't have this, and service is rated as per that. So the service rating on Sorted, and I don't know if it's still on there or not, but at least when it was, it isn't reflective of the quality of service that a provider is giving you. It's more the quantity of service that a provider is giving. So do they have an app or don't they have an app? stuff like that.
Okay, so I'm going to get a checklist put on my website if I ever become a provider, and I just say I do this and provide it, but it's garbage, and I'll get like 95%.
Well, technically it can't be garbage because providers are bound by certain regulations and
polished
laws.
garbage.
Yeah, but it in a sense.
Have you seen some of those apps? Come
on. But in a sense, I guess the main point there is that if a provider has got a 95% service rating, it's not because people have raved about how great service they give. It's just they fulfill 95% of the conditions that sort of thing a provider should have.
Fair. So
in terms of service. Yeah. Go on.
So your whole model, like my understanding is someone comes in, you got all the research, the back end, takes on a personalized journey that takes 0.8 of a second to produce you piece of. Anyways, I won't swear in it. Well, I do swear in it, but just not in front of you. How does it work? Why is this cyborg trying to give me advice? Where do they get their money? They're not charging me. There must be a scam. That's kind of how people think.
And most probably yes. Now, so we kind of we do have people who come onto the website and they're like, oh, so you're saying you're gonna give me really good financial advice, and you're not gonna charge me anything. Yeah. It's too good to be true. Yeah, it's most probably a scam.
Charge them $1 so you don't have that problem anymore. If you're trying to get I'll let you finish, sorry. But if you ever if you get a drawer and you leave it outside and you put free, no one will take it. But if you put $100, it'll be gone by tomorrow.
Yeah, true. So what we do is, the way I'd like to explain that the way we explain it to all our clients, and I'd like to explain it to all our listeners, that you've been paying our fees ever since you've been in a KiwiSaver account. Because you're already paying your KiwiSaver provider fees, and we believe part of that fees is towards giving, part of a service a KiwiSaver provider should provide their clients is financial advice. So you've already been paying for financial advice ever since you've been in a KiwiSaver scheme. You've just not been getting it. So what we've done is we've got arrangements with a whole bunch of providers where we're giving their clients, or we're giving clients advice on not their behalf, but we're giving clients advice, but we're being paid by the KiwiSaver providers. So we've got certain KiwiSaver providers who accept that they should be giving clients advice. So they're very happy to share the fees that they receive with us in order to give clients advice. So we're essentially being funded by the KiwiSaver providers, but ultimately the KiwiSaver providers are being funded by regular Kiwis who've got KiwiSaver accounts. Yeah. So ultimately you are still paying for the advice. You've always been paying for the advice. Now you've got an opportunity to actually get it.
Oh, yeah. Listen here, you little KiwiSaver providers. No. So essentially, they're not paying anything extra. No. You're getting paid out of what they would have paid anyways, but now you've got someone that helps you. Yeah.
Correct.
All right, got it. It sounded, The challenge, I'm going to pretend I'm in Shark Tank right now. You know, when they present it and they're like, hey, I've got this patent, I've got this new idea. And then who's the bald one? What's his name? Kevin Leary or Mr. Wonderful?
No idea.
Well, Shark Tank's like this investment thing.
I know, but I don't know the names of everyone on there.
Okay, well, Mr. Wonderful, he'd be like, that's a great idea that you've got. Looks like you've got sales, you've got a successful process, business, compliance. What stops the big people just coming and just stuffing you up? Because your point of difference is actually the very thing they need to do because they have scale. They have the ability to inject a whole lot of capital, and then they can streamline that so it's more cost effective, and they're ticking the box. Because part of the important things with being a default provider is that you need to be seen to trying to get them out of the default and providing advice. Yeah. So what protects you from that? Or is that the goal?
No, I suppose the main difference between the service a large KiwiSaver provider who might come up with their own robo-advice offering and us is the fact that we're independent. A KiwiSaver provider ultimately will only give you advice around its own products. So it could say that, hey, you should go in a conservative fund or a growth fund, as long as that conservative growth fund is one of ours.
Yeah.
Whereas National Capital is independent. So we not only give you financial advice, but we're not gonna aligned to any single provider. So we're out there doing research on all of them and then letting you know which ones you should be with. Now, let me kind of like, right now, when I do say all of them, that's something that we are aiming to reach. Right now, we cover about 60% of the market.
Because some of them just probably couldn't even plug in very well because they got legacy technology from 1920. No comment. You want to make friends with them.
Exactly.
Even I heard that banks, a lot of the banks still use COBOL coding, I think, and it's like 346 different characters. That's really inefficient, and they're just like sticking it out. But that's a story for another day. Okay, so the challenge you have is you've got this independence and trust, and you position your brand in such a way that, you know, you've seen as this independent organization that adds values to Kiwis. The challenge is, like you said before, is once you've researched and got the right provider, then why would you change unless they suddenly become an issue? So you got your point of difference is your independence. But that's going to be a real challenge, is because if they have the offering and the personalized service, then they can still deliver the outcome. The only thing would really be brand and perception. That would be a distinction.
I suppose what we're doing, and one of the major kind of, I suppose, benefits of being a National Capital client is the annual reviews and the ongoing research. So just because a KiwiSaver provider is suitable for you or a good one today doesn't mean that's going to be the case in 5 years' time. Milford is an amazing provider, but if tomorrow Milford decides that actually I think Fisher Funds is better, Milford is not going to give you a call and say, hey, I think you should move to Fisher Funds. Your National Capital advisor will.
And that does become important, is like the underlying investment is sound as long as it's run effectively. Most of the risk is really just volatility and it going up and down. But there are providers that are just not good. I'll label a specific fund and get sued, and I'll explain why I think that from my subjective opinion, is the Disruption Fund from Nico. So essentially it's, you know, a basket of individual companies.
Yep.
Less than 100, probably around 30. And so, and it's run by ARC. ARC is the underlying fund manager that does it. And the feeling that you get is like, oh, they had these massive returns, they did really well, but the underlying investment doesn't tick the diversification box, doesn't have an offering for cash, bonds, property, and shares. And then if people invest in that, chasing the returns, and then, you know, that there's a market correction and a number of those equities go to zero or go down and they actually crystallize a loss, then that changes public perception around KiwiSaver.
Yeah.
So I think that is a good point, that you're assessing if the provider is still able to deliver on what they want. But then the question becomes, how do you assess that? Because it sounds like you've got a digital advice offering that you're going through. How do you go about assessing providers if they're still good or bad?
So and we'll come to that Nico ARC front after I answer this. But along with our digital front end, which is consumer facing, we also have an investment research team in the back end that actually goes out there and talks with KiwiSaver providers and does the research. So we've got real people back there with collectively hundreds of years of investment experience and investment research experience who are doing all that research on our clients' behalf. So rather than every client of ours reading through PDSs and SIPOs of the 30 plus providers that are out there, we've got a team that is doing all of that on their behalf.
Okay, cool.
So that's the way we stay abreast and really understand what's going on with every provider. Now coming back to the Nico ARC fund, which I suppose you were saying. Again, the mindset is there is no bad fund or good fund. It's just fund that is suitable for a certain strategy and suitable for certain people. So potentially, yes, you wouldn't, someone for whom KiwiSaver is their main investment wouldn't put all their money into the Nico ARC fund because, as you said, it's not diversified. but it isn't meant to be a diversified fund. But the Nico ARC fund could be part of a strategy where someone actually is putting bulk of their money to diversified funds, but they want some exposure to these real high growth, high risk, high return companies that could either make them or that could either make or break. But if you kind of like put just 10% of your investment into the Nico ARC fund, that could actually be part of a good strategy for a particular person who needs that.
Okay, fair if they're not going all in on it.
Yeah.
What would can you go different providers? Can you go 50% this, 10% that? Because it sounds like what I can do, and if you've got some magic where you can do something separate, is allocate to different funds within a provider. Yeah. Okay, same thing. Damn.
Yeah. No. So the answer to that is yes and no. So no, on the face of it, no, you cannot split your money between, say, a Milford and a Fisher, or a Generate and a Simplicity. But there are a few new KiwiSaver providers come out now that are more like platforms.
Kiwi Wrap, I think.
Yeah, and they've basically got even the Invest Now KiwiSaver scheme. So they've got funds from different providers on their platform. So again, they might not have the entire range of KiwiSaver funds, but if you really wanted to kind of split your money between different providers, that's the way to go. So you would go in there, and potentially the Invest Now would have both the Milford funds and a fund from ANZ, so you could split your money through them. It gets a little bit more complicated though.
Yeah, I think I'm over parenting here. I worry because of Australia is the model where you can self-manage your super, and I've seen it consistently self-managed to zero. Not to say people are incapable of doing it.
Yeah.
1% of them are amazing at it.
Yeah.
But then, you have this, you have a bit of mix, a bit of that. Maybe you're paying administrative costs across all of them. So, that's going in a small amount. And then you get the illusion of diversification, what not necessarily the benefit. Like if you can understand a provider and how they're working and that they're one of the better ones, there's no real need to go across the board. The challenge, I wonder, so, okay, you get someone comes in, they're like, yo, fill out this, blah, 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 do my 0.8 second plan. So I haven't moved on from that. And they pump out this advice, and it's good advice, and they get a feel for what they should do in the next step. How does it not lead to only 3 providers being recommended? Like you've sort of decided a provider is really good. Is there some deviation, or the 60% providers, 59% are ignored?
It kind of, again, this is one of those yes and no answers. It kind of does lead a lot to, like, if I've decided that, hey, provider A is really, really good, then it most probably is really, really good for the bulk of our clients. But what we also allow clients to do is select certain personal preferences. So a client might want to be, might be really focused on, like, I want low fees, or I really want a provider who is completely focused on ethical investing, or potentially I want a provider who is a New Zealand-based provider because I don't like the big banks, whereas others might be actually, I want a big bank. So we take those considerations into play too, and gonna give a user a really personalized recommendation based on what your personal priorities also are.
God, I don't envy you. How can you build the infrastructure for that? It just sounds like a headache. So let's say they go down the ESG fund. Does that mean they get categorized to someone or do you revisit like the annual review as new questions? Because the thing is, like, you got ESG categorization, and then you've only got them limited to these, ones that.
So the annual review essentially gives all clients an opportunity to basically re-answer all those questions. So we tell them, hey, last year you said ESG was your number one priority. Is it still the same, or has it changed? So you as a client could change that. And then the recommendation would change based on that.
Yeah, there's no one really doing that.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
And we also, along with that, the background research that we're doing on every KiwiSaver, on the KiwiSaver providers that we work with, is ongoing too. So just because someone says, hey, I'm an ESG fund, or just because they've got socially responsible in the name of their fund doesn't automatically mean we take them as an ESG provider. We're doing our own research also.
Actually, no, I could think of a provider that has that in their name. So, okay, then how do you protect against churn? So let's say you got someone in, I'm just grilling you, you poor bugger. Someone comes in, they go through, they had the categories, the annual review, and then each new review pumps out a new provider, and then they're changing and crystallizing.
It doesn't necessarily need to.
Okay. How do you stop it doing that, or do you just...
We don't. Ultimately, it depends on a client. So as a client, if you change your priorities every year, then there will be churn. Again, the ultimate decision is of the client. So we'll say that, your priorities have changed. So here's our new recommendation, but your old recommendation still stays. And so it's up to you to kind of then decide whether you want to move or not. Also, most people's situations and personal preferences really don't change year on year. If you're a 26-year-old today, you're not going to be a 45-year-old tomorrow. So most of the times, other than some minor tweaks, the recommendation will remain the same.
Yeah.
It just depends, like as you get closer to your goal, either it being a first home or retirement, that's when things start changing a bit faster, and that's when you really need to kind of make sure that you're staying on top of your investments.
Fair. Okay.
Part of our advice, as I said, like what we're trying to do is give financial advice, not just tell you which KiwiSaver fund you should be in. So part of our advice also kind of shows the client how close or far they are from their goal, and gives them calculations, etc., based on which they can decide that, hey, if I contribute 4% to my KiwiSaver fund, here's where I'm going to reach. If I contribute 8%, here's where I'm going to reach. So in those annual reviews that we do, we basically we've taken information on like what you've got currently in your KiwiSaver, what the growth over the last year has been, and we can give them a picture, an annual snapshot of where they are in their journey towards achieving the goal that they have outlined.
Just on that, do you have like a set return irrespective, or is it based on historic? I got to change the camera over and we'll wrap it up soon, but yeah, I think it's about to run out, so I'm just gonna push it again. But yeah, answer that question.
Now we use the numbers provided by the FMA. So the FMA has provided a set of projected returns,
5.5% for a growth aggressive.
Yeah, that all KiwiSaver providers now have to use on their calculators. And yeah, so we use a similar number to
Good, yeah, because you're like, oh, so, last year we did 60%, so, you're going to have $10 million in retirement.
Yeah, we make sure that we don't do that.
Do you have a means of protecting them? So, like, you do your annual review, their preferences don't necessarily change. I think a 26-year-old or anyone less than 26 is probably changing their mind every 5 seconds and questioning their whole reality, maybe. That was just me. I don't know. But, like, so they do the annual review, their preferences maybe don't change.
Yeah.
Do you tell them, like, hey, like, let's say you did your annual review in March of when COVID came out, the KiwiSaver tanked by 20-30%.
Yeah.
And you're saying your preferences have changed. Here's this provider. Is there a means that you mitigate against them churning too much?
Education.
Yeah. So but in that moment, do you educate, or is it you educate in the lead up?
So you cannot educate in the moment. You have to preempt base things.
Okay.
So what we're really kind of like in all our communications with our clients and prospects, we're really educating them about volatility. We're really telling them that volatility is not something special. It's part and parcel of an investment. So you should be ready for the coming market downturn. That doesn't mean you should go all in cash and wait for it. No, you should just expect it, and you should be prepared to ride it out. And we do a lot of that. We don't wait for the 30% market drop to let our clients know that that's what they should do? We prepare them in advance. And what we've seen is that in the couple of market drops that have happened, we've had like most of our clients actually have come to us and said, hey, can we move to a higher volatility fund, a fund with higher growth assets now that the market has fallen? And I believe that's because of the education that we are giving them.
Well, I mean, that's confident. You know what I mean? Like, because the challenge is you've got a balanced portfolio, and let's say, and they're increasing it to more aggressive, and you know, there's a 20% drop in their balance, so they're selling that, crystallizing that, buying growth assets at a cheaper price. But really, the more important distinction was that they're trying to achieve the objective, as opposed to try and time the market.
True.
So that's good that they're not fearful, which is probably the hardest thing to teach. Yeah. So this is silver lining. How do you keep people engaged in education then? Like, what is the education? Is it the blog and then they go there? Is it a newsletter? Like, how do you keep them caring?
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is sending out at least like a monthly email to our clients, mostly just with a short 2-minute video.
Okay.
It's just gonna making sure that we don't overwhelm them with content and here's 15 blogs that will take you half an hour to read. Those people are busy. And unlike you and me, Ryan, I don't think everyone is obsessed with KiwiSaver and investments and money markets.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is just we try to work really hard so that we can distill what we could say in half an hour in a few minutes, but still give the client the same level of education and knowledge that they would get in 30 minutes.
Okay, fair. All right, well, now the call to action part of the marketing part, they've heard you, they either hate your guts so they love you and think this is amazing. What is something of value that they could do immediately, like a place they could go to get their KiwiSaver checked out, or whether, I think you talked about an ebook, like what should they do?
So we've got what we call a KiwiSaver health check on our website. And that definitely is the first step towards sorting out your KiwiSaver account. It's a form that would take you no more than 10 to 15 minutes to fill. But you go in there, you fill up that form, you give us the information that we need as financial advisors in order to give you a recommendation. So you fill up that form. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you anything. That information comes back to us. Then we create your recommendations. We together set up an appointment for you to speak to one of our advisors. We send you those recommendations, which are just, it's a web page, an interactive web page, so you can know as little or as much as you want. And those recommendations explain to you exactly what we believe you should do and why. And then you've got the ability to kind of have a quick 15-minute chat with an advisor.
All right, let's
ask
not
them any
oversell
questions.
Let's not oversell it.
And go on. Yeah.
You had a great offering and then you decided, fuck it. It was perfect. So nationalcapital.co.nz?
Yeah.
Yeah, go there and then there's a KiwiSaver health check. Will lead to an advisor. It's pretty choice. Check it out.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming, mate.
Cheers.